Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Covenant Cast, where we discuss the past, present, and future of the tabletop gaming industry. I'm Zach.
And I'm Steven, and today we have a very special guest who represents essentially all three of those, past, present, and future. It's Christian Petersen, the founder of Fantasy Flight Games, the former CEO of Asmodee North America, now has his toes dipped into quite a bit of water, from what we can tell through Strange Stars, his kind of incubator for ideas. When Christian was at FFG, there was a lot of innovation that happened. We saw, starting with Twilight Imperium, really the first big box, epic
Chunky,
board game.
crazy board game.
Apparently, at the time, I think we were children, but nobody really knew if anyone was ready to pay for that kind of experience out of a board game.
It was back in the 90s. When board games were $20 Monopoly or maybe less at Walmart or whatever.
And I think that bet was ultimately proven right. If we look at current Kickstarters, it's
for sure.
State of the market. And then we went all the way to the LCG model. Really, that's where we get involved. I think Christian was obviously a huge push in that direction of that model even existing to begin with, and really all the great LCGs that came out. X-Wing being pre-painted and kind of the splash it made, bringing back Netrunner. These kinds of things were all happening. And then kind of there at the end, KeyForge, which is what we're talking about today, the first of the unique deck games, one of two now out there in the world, and a huge risk, hugely different model. And I know talking to Christian at the time, there was a lot of, is this worth it or not? Yeah. We don't know how this is going to go. Obviously, it went extremely well. Millions of decks ultimately were sold. And so it is only fitting that there's one person who brought it back or is bringing it back for a new take or a new spin after having had its algorithm lost in some strange accident.
And the pandemic.
Yeah, pandemic happened. The algorithm was lost. We thought, Zach and I, KeyForge it's definitely not coming back.
Yeah, we originally said literally, if not by this Gen Con, we didn't think it would happen. And then a couple weeks before Gen Con 2022, it's announced that his company, Ghost Galaxy Games, has reacquired it and is essentially rebuilding it through a crowdfunding campaign that should be going live today.
GameFound, which is live now. You can check that out. There's a lot of people following that campaign, and you're going to learn a lot more about that in this interview, as well as retail in general, a lot of wisdom that Christian has gained throughout the years, and just the approach to KeyForge, organized play, and hopefully a lot of questions that are going to be answered that you might have. So it's always a pleasure to have Christian on the podcast, or really in any format. We've interviewed him many, many times throughout the years, and it's just a wonderful personality in this space. So Zach's going to take the reins on this one. It's a solo conversation, Zach and Christian. I'm going to let them take it away, and we hope you'll enjoy. Stay tuned.
All right, so we are on the eve of the launch of the crowdfunding campaign for KeyForge, coming back presumably from almost death. I wouldn't necessarily declare it dead. We still had our subscription up the whole time. It was never quite gone. And I know we're joined by a very special guest here, Christian T. Petersen, the founder of FFG, now the owner of Ghost Galaxy Games, among other companies. But I know you're busy. I know the campaign is tomorrow. You got a lot going on. So I just wanted to say thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. And I before we dive into the KeyForge stuff, I've got to know. So last time we officially heard from you, Steven did an interview with you back at Gamma 2020. And that experience sticks out particularly in my mind because it was right before the pandemic started. And we were at Gamma. The president gave the speech about lockdowns, and we were concerned, could we fly home, or are we going to get stuck in Reno? Can't imagine. That could have been a different story. So I'd be curious to just hear from you, hear your story. What's been going on in your world since March of 2020?
All right, thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me. It's been a while. I know it's. I think we have a history of interviews going back with Covenant back in I don't know how many years now, 10 years maybe, 8, 7 years. So it's nice to be back. So you asked, what's been going on since Gamma 2019. I think Gamma 2019 to me was that was the pandemic beginning, right? Because we were there and we were seeing people all suddenly get up and wrap up their booths and literally run out the exhibit hall, and didn't quite know what would happen or what to expect, moving forward from that event, which obviously had a huge impact on everybody and on us as well. During that interview, I'm trying to remember that was 19, right?
It was 2020. So
sorry, 2020. Right.
Yeah,
so sorry. So
March of 2020.
Right. Of course it was. It was March 2020. It was it was at the eve of doom.
We had no idea.
So at that point, I interview. We talked a little about the industry and what I was doing, and I think I had mentioned that, upon stepping back from Fantasy Flight Games and Asmodee, I really wanted to pursue some small interests of mine, start some small businesses, and have the freedom to explore and meander wherever I wanted to go. And so with Strange Stars, which is the company that I founded to hold the investment capital that we were going to invest from myself and a few close friends and partners developed over the years. We started a range of different initiatives, different small companies that we wanted to run. Some of them were completely off, out crazy, nothing related really to what we did before. We have a VR company called Dream Trace, which is a company that has a couple of huge stages, and we're literally able to track high fidelity VR movement. And so we do that to sell games, but also to sell pre-visualization to architects and builders and retailers that want to pre-visualize their spaces before they engage in construction, or if they want to have a dialogue about how the space looks in one way or another. It's a kind of a thing we always wished we had when we were building our Gen Con booths, right? To be able to actually walk through them before we literally were on the floor. So that kind of stuff. The other companies are much more focused on the kind of the bread and butter of what I knew and where it came from. We have a software company called Awbase, which makes software for publishers and creative companies to manage contractors, which is a huge part of the industry, and I think a very important one, very complicated one to actually do well. We have a company called Artiforge, which actually is interesting because it connects deeply, I think, to KeyForge in many ways, because starting the KeyForge project, which we did, I think it took us almost 2 years to actually get it done. After the first meeting we had with Richard, was really a kind of an eye-opener to me, what digital printing could do. So whether it's procedurally generated content or whether it's content that's kind of print on demand or very flexible ways of actually producing individualized, specific, idiosyncratic things, was something that was out of reach before in the printing business, because there, generally speaking, you want to run as much as you can of the same thing to reach economies of scale, and digital printing kind of threw it all the way upside down, and so that fascinated me a lot, and so that's why we started Artiforge, which was we had acquired the old digital press press unit that Fantasy Flight that I had originally started at FFG, and that had done lots of interesting projects over the years. And we acquired them as the basis for starting Artiforge, and then we invested a ton in very, very huge, difficult, and high quality machines. They're more difficult than we thought they would be when we first bought them, but they're actually the exact machines that KeyForge was made on. So whether it was made in Germany or China, these are the exact same machine. And so we have a huge digital press, we have cutters, collators, all these things, coders, to actually make the digital content, because I felt that was really something where there's some future for the industry in that, because of how creative and how loop-free it can be and how individualized it can be. So that was something that we really dug into, and we started another company called ForgeFire, which was really doing the digital side of that, because of course what goes in digital press is digital information, and so to be able to have digital information put together in a sensible way, and in a way that's exciting for the gaming audience is not easy. We learned a lot of lessons over my career, how to interact with that, and I was fortunate enough to have some people at FFG come along over with me, two strange stars, and they happen to be some of the architects and engineers behind some of our more exciting initiatives, whether it be the digital side behind KeyForge or the some of the digital games that we had done that interface both digital and physical, like Mansions of Madness or Descent, or we also did one for the Star Wars Imperial Assault. So all those things were really exciting to me, and I felt that there was a real synergy between publishing, digital printing, software, and kind of probably as usual, what I do is I do too many things, and so I started them all at once rather than start one at a time, because I felt they all had this flywheel effect that the success of one could assist the success of the other, as well as, of course, each of these companies being open to pivoting in other directions if they find that the business is that's what it needs. So all these businesses, whether it's Awbase or Artiforge, are doing great business with other companies in the industry. So then, of course, the pandemic hit, and that was a pretty hard blow to starting new businesses. Honestly, it wasn't easy. We not only do you have the sort of the fracturing of your staff at a certain point, but you also have there seemed to be just a general inability to want to start something new. Everybody was sort of huddling down. We weren't going to meetings, not going to conferences, not going to shows. And that was tough. So we kind of had almost a 2-year period where we were more or less in R&D mode and couldn't really evolve out into the actual world. That's gotten substantially better, of course, the last 6 months. So we're out, and we're excited. So that's I don't know if that answers your question, Zach. But we're doing lots of exciting things, investing in different companies, doing new things, and KeyForge happened to come along. Maybe that's your next question. Sort of, do you want me to continue in that direction?
Yeah, sure. So I'm part of me was wondering if maybe just pandemic hit and it's like, I'm going to go sit on a beach for 2 years. But I'm not surprised at all that your reaction was actually starting and founding so many of these different companies. And it's really exciting. I know we talk about this on the podcast a lot of these conversations the past decade. A lot of innovations in the spaces that we care about came from FFG with you at the helm. And so not surprised that I'm excited to see whatever it is that you're doing when you have some freedom to just kind of tinker wherever you want to tinker. And that does lead to the next question, which is you're starting all these companies and what, in our experience, when a game starts and then ends, it's very challenging for that game to come back. Hugely
challenging. It almost never works.
Yeah. So can you tell me, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Or what? Why in the world? Obviously, KeyForge is innovative and announced and came out in 2018. But what is it about KeyForge / why in the world did you make this decision to buy KeyForge and bring it back from the dead or from the brink of being dead?
It was because I'm crazy. Clearly, that's it. Yeah, there's certainly. I mean, everything about entrepreneurship requires some, slight dose of madness. I think you guys have your own business as well. It's entrepreneurship. What I tell people coming into these small companies, it sounds very interesting and sexy to be an entrepreneur, but most of the time it's just the world kicking you in the face. And that's sort of what you have to deal with. So you get kind of
I'm going to quote you on that one.
You get kind of a disfigured face after a while. Yes, I mean, I have almost never tried to revive a game that has been injured for whatever reason, because it's very, very difficult. Why not just do a new one? It has always been the case when this stuff has sort of arisen. There's a little bit of a difference when it comes to looking at an older title, a nostalgic title that's sort of been gone for a while, and it turns out that there's some residual goodwill with that title, and you can bring it back. But
like Netrunner.
Like Netrunner example, we did quite a few of those. Games. Over the years, we brought back Fury of Dracula, right, and Britannia, and a number of other games like that had some solid following, and we thought we could introduce them to a new audience and introduce them to more modern, components and so on. So Cosmic Encounter springs to mind as being one as well. But reviving a game line that's been injured is like catching a falling knife, I think. There's only a few outcomes that happens. You miss and it hits your foot, or you miss and you catch the blade, or you may be lucky and sort of grab onto that moment where the handle is possible. So it's and that's that kind of question, I think, is we've certainly wrestled with. I think there are a few considerations related to KeyForge that I think makes this a little bit different. First, I think KeyForge, almost more than any other game, was sold into a marketplace very, very broadly. It sold millions and millions of decks. We don't have really good data of how many decks went to individual users, so I know that how many decks were sold, how many decks we've registered online, and so certainly we have to acknowledge that there was a very, very wide, likely million plus players that have played KeyForge, and that's something that is very encouraging just from the outset. So that was one of the factors that maybe allowed us to take a punt on it, basically, try to or engage with it. The other consideration, of course, was that one of the problems that the game had incurred was the loss of the software on Asmodee's side, which injured what I think was a relatively successful product. So at the time when they had to stop publishing it, my sense was it was nowhere near the height what it was. It was still a very, very, very solid product that I think almost any publisher in the tabletop industry would have been thrilled to publish. But it had this significant injury of missing its software, and unlike any other game where I can ask the printer to print more, KeyForge literally needs to be, every deck is birthed right through this procedural software, and so it's every single one has had the singular attention of the whole company for a number of seconds where it's first processed and then rendered. So they're all children of this software, and that was lost, and that was a big problem because it took a long time to develop, and it's not just I know some people have rewritten some algorithms out there to try to recreate the way that it does it. It's always, of course, easier to reverse engineer something than it is to engineer something in the first place. But the software is more than just the mathematical equation of how does it generate decks. It's also the whole operating environment that a company has to operate in order to create them. So that you need a place to upload graphics, to put in text for your designers, to create iterations and track changes. And then there is the actual algorithm itself, which basically says it runs through an enormous amount of different rules and weights and all these things and checks and balances that's put into place by the designers, right? So we need a kind of a big lever tool where we can push and pull and turn dials and whatever where we think things should go, and that needs a good interface to consistent interface to have as well. So that needs to be created. The database that holds all the key component parts needs to be created, and then there's the actual logic processing itself, which is not a super big part of the whole thing, but it's the most important part. Maybe that's where the true birth happens, right? But there's so much more that needs to live and breathe surrounding that, not least the rendering engine, because that's what comes later, right? Once the algorithm has spat out what is basically a string of data, then we have to take that and compile that together into something physical and something that's a high resolution rendered deck, and that has to be done, and then it has to be properly provided in a way where it can actually be printed and so on. So the software is all of that. It's not just some algorithm in the middle that's but of course that's the brain of the operation. But it also needs the lungs and the feet and the arms and the oxygen and all that stuff. So the unique part about that was that we were building this Forgefire engine already, which was not built for KeyForge. It was built to be more abstract, built to be more where you could upload, individual idiosyncratic card games, and whether it's a procedurally generated or whether it's an explicit card game where you just want to be able to hit print and it spits out a digital copy of it. So we sort of felt like we had already done half the work. And so there was an opportunity, I think, that maybe was unique to us in that we could probably take that and move that forward both at half the price and at half the time that potentially somebody else would do it. And I had the added benefit that the engineers who'd already gone through it once were mostly on board here, and so it almost seems like something that we meant to happen, but that's certainly not the case. So we're trying to catch this falling knife. We think there are some benefits to it, but you're right. I mean, that really maybe grows to the heart of the crowdfunding project. We just don't know what the audience level is out there. What is the enthusiasm of the players? Are they willing to re-engage with the game? Have they never disengaged? And are they willing to invest in a new project that's going to take this thing to the next stage of its life? That's what we don't get when we do traditional publishing. We sort of, as a publisher, in general, will believe in something, take all the risk, produce all the stuff, and put it on the market, and then hope for the best. And that's what I've been doing for 25 years, and it's worked pretty well. But we've never done, like I said, truly try to bring back an injured title like this. So the crowdfunding tool, I think, is perfect for that, because it allows us to communicate directly with the player base. It allows us to understand what the concerns, what the desires, what the pain points are. It also provides just some naked truth as to how many people are out there, how many people really want this product, and that we can actually gauge on, and we can then direct ourselves as to how much resources do we designate towards this. And I think the early signs are very positive. We went to Gen Con and we didn't know what to expect. We had a booth that was basically a KeyForge booth at the point, and we were pretty much overwhelmed by all of the hugs and warm welcomes from the community that we got, and the amount of players willing to do demos and play decks, and lots of good stories were told. Lots of questions about what happened to the algorithm. It's asked probably 100 times, so that was very, very encouraging for us. That we could see that there's really a living community. Also, pretty excited about the reception that we got for these the KeyForge Adventure decks, which I think you guys have gotten a copy of, I personally love the collaborative living card games, and the fact that we can make these KeyForge Adventures, which turns KeyForge in from a head-to-head game into a collaborative game where you're defeating this challenge or another, was super exciting, and it was very well done by FFG. They did a great job with it. They due to the pandemic, they made it available for free print and play. We've then been able to go out and create a commercial production of it, and that will be hitting the market hopefully sometime soon. And we sold out of it, the Friday morning, we sold out of all of them. So that was like, boom, head exploding. That was really great. That's obviously was more successful than we thought it would be. And that's kind of where you want to be as your hand is racing towards that falling knife. You want the confidence to keep going, if nothing else, to save your feet, right? So then, of course, we announced the crowdfunding platform, and there's definitely good questions about why did you do that, et cetera, et cetera. It's an unusual thing, and pretty much answered it. It goes down to your question. Trying to revive an injured game like that has very rarely been done successfully, and it's quite risky. And I think we need to lean in heavily into the fan base to understand where they're at.
I have a million questions now. There's a lot to take in there.
That's a lot of questions.
First question for me is, a million. We're going to be here a while. Just kidding. So first question is, I was going to ask why the crowdfunding campaign, which you've addressed to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. But now I want to ask, if you're using it to gauge how many people are still interested, what's the audience look like? Of course, I think crowdfunding campaigns are fractional in terms of the overall picture of who all might be interested and involved. But what does success look like for you in the crowdfunding campaign? Because, I get a sense in some projects, like we interviewed Eric with Eric's Curiosa before they launched the Sorcery TCG Kickstarter. And if that Kickstarter goes bad, that game I don't think ever gets printed. And they had, ambitions, and they crushed their goals on that one. But I don't necessarily get a sense that this is correct me if I'm wrong, make or break for KeyForge, as much as the scale of success maybe points it in a different direction. So I would just be curious to know, what does success look like in this campaign, and how does it affect the future of the game?
I mean, I don't think that's true. I think if despite our best efforts, and which may not be good enough, but despite what we have done, if this campaign really fails and there isn't enough votes, if you will, or financial support for the Winds of Exchange, which is really, the Kickstarter is called the Winds of Exchange. And I should say it's not a Kickstarter. That's I'm using it as a noun. It's a GameFound campaign, and the GameFound guys have been awesome. But first of all, hats off to them. I really appreciated working with them. This is my first crowdfunding campaign. So I kind of feel it's very exciting for me in a way, because I get to make all these mistakes. Fortunately, there's wise people around that sort of can slap my fingers and say, "Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that." And so I don't.
It's good to have those people around.
Exactly. No, but I mean, if this campaign fails, if it comes in, then we will revisit whether it's worth it. It's not. It definitely will have an impact. It will be meaningful, and it will definitely create a sense of, if it comes in very low over target or even under target. Now, obviously, we would need to acknowledge that the level of interest to support a game like this, which is not an inexpensive game to make, is just not there. So this is not some sort of a gaslight. Look at this, do this. While don't worry, it's still gonna happen. That's not true. We do understand that a crowdfunding platform, though, is representative. So we don't think every single player is necessarily going to interact with us. And go on there, and just as if it's going to be more English favored audience as well. So we don't necessarily have all the groundswell support you may see from some other localized languages, but it is a very, very directional and hard data method for us to get a sense of the market. I think I haven't seen any better. And given that there's been 2 years of hiatus, we just don't have enough data in the market. There hasn't been any conventions, there hasn't been any organized play, and then of course the dearth of product has been a problem. Then we have retailers that have maybe lost faith in the product, so we've seen some liquidation of the product, which is very poisonous to a brand, because there's no way in hell that we could ever make a new product, at the level of liquidation pricing that's occurring. So definitely, it's not true that if this thing fails or goes poorly, that we still are going to go for it. That's not true. Now, that said, I think the early signs are very encouraging. I think as of this morning, we have 9,000 followers on the campaign, and like I said, what happened at Gen Con was super, super exciting. But if the thing doesn't go well, maybe we find different ways to make KeyForge work. Maybe people just want KeyForge Adventures. I don't know. Do we throw everything in the garbage if it fails? Probably not. I mean, it has some value, but obviously continuing it as it has been becomes unviable. And so, anyway, those are all doomy, gloomy things to talk about. I don't. I was
going to say, do you have an idea of what success looks like? Obviously, I think there's a lot of energy behind the game, so I don't expect failure. But what does success actually look like for you?
Well, it's I don't want to put a dollar number on it, because I think that you could have a very high dollar number, and you could have a sense that that's from a relatively few amount of people. I think it really is sort of a combination of, what is the the amount of sales, amount of different people engaging, of course, what's the top line that's coming in on it. And it also gives us a real sense for the community, which we've already starting to get. We're seeing all the activity on the boards. We're really thrilled to have a number of content creators like yourselves that are still hanging on to the game and are actually quite enthusiastic about talking about it again, right? So that's a very, very good sign. I've never done a Kickstarter before. A crowdfunding platform, a crowdfunding project before, and so I hesitate to say what success looks like. Because success has so many different layers to it, right? I think success looks to me is where we look at the campaign and overall think that this is absolutely wonderful. It gives us a wind in our sails. It gives us confidence to go out and invest not only in the Winds of Campaign set and to be able to fulfill those items, but to invest more generally speaking in the product and try to revive it, try to get R&D and designers and hire staff to really get the OP and all of these sort of ancillary legs of life that a big game needs to thrive. There's definitely going to be some changes that we're making to the way that FFG did theirs, particularly in the OP side. So there will be some people that will be unhappy with us, which is unavoidable. Everybody is coming from their own direction of what they like as being part of KeyForge, which is wonderful, but it's also one of the causes of some issues related to OP.
Before we get into that, and I will ask you about the future of the game and organized play and what the vision for that looks like, but one of the kind of more interesting is a bad word for this, but one of the interesting reactions I've seen, and it's even a little awkward for us, right, with a crowdfunding campaign. Mm-hmm. Like I said earlier, we have a subscription that's been up since the game has come out, mm-hmm. and now you have a product that you can get through a Kickstarter campaign that we have to either serve through a subscription or decide to skip that release. And as retailers, I know there's some retailers, like you said, that got burned by the product or have seen it and had it sit on the shelf and then it went away.
Right.
So were there concerns going in about essentially how retail would receive a crowdfunding campaign and then how that might affect their adoption of it and or support of the game?
Sure. Sure. We have a concern about that. I mean, it's also a concern that we can't have a retailer pledge on there, but that's part of the agreement that we made when we bought the game. Is that Asmodee as a distributor still gets to be this exclusive single interface with retailers. So we're going to be trying to do something for retailers, in general. Now all that said, if the audience and the gamers and the players are not behind a game, then there's no way that a re-released game is going to get the retail support. So for a game like this, and that's been always one of the challenges of re-releasing a game, is that you have retailers with old copies sitting and gathering dust or had been cleared out, and so I think the landscape, with a few great exceptions, but the landscape in general has been sort of polluted and really kind of gunked up when it comes to the retail landscape. So we have to take it, I think, one step at a time. And say we have to be able to reach out to the players. We have to get the players behind this. We have to understand whether there's support there, and if there is, then ultimately that will reward the retailers as well. I mean, we don't see retailers as consumers of our product. We see retailers as partners in the pipeline of moving product from the printing machines to the end users, and for them doing that, they deserve a piece of the pie, if you will, in terms of for the financial aspect of it. But I think publishers need to be most concerned about the people playing the game. And so when you have, and like I said, I don't know if our approach here is the exact right one, because there isn't really any, as far as I know, there isn't any playbook for how you bring back an injured game like this, and so we have to just trust our instinct and experience with it. But if I can bring a pretty substantial fan base back, I think that is much more valuable than trying to shove it down into retail again. And so That we maybe are burning some bridges, and on that side, I don't think that that's necessarily true. I wonder if bridges that are burned on that side weren't burnt already before we even came to the party. And I think to repair those bridges, I think we need to get the communities engaged. We need to get OP engaged back in the shops. We need to get people talking about it. We need to have players be excited about it, because if you don't have players excited about a game, it doesn't matter how many retailers you have supporting it. That's even more injurious to the retailer to try to support something that just doesn't sell. So, we are a retailer ourselves. We have our own retail store here, and so we're well aware of the way that Kickstarter influences the or crowdfunding campaigns in general influence the dynamic of games, and it's true, it does. In many ways, the publisher gets to pick the low-hanging fruit, if you will, and which in some ways is also a good thing, because it has helped lower the barrier of entry a lot. I remember if I could have done this back when I started out, I probably would have done it too, because we didn't have the resources to do what we needed to do. So we had to suffer game by game by game, hoping to accumulate a little bit of cash here, a little bit of cash there, and invest it all back into the next thing and all back into the next thing. And we didn't have the advantage of getting a lot of the cash up front. So we had to build that slowly over time, and via privation, on our part. It of course is when you have that kind of need, it does create a lot of incentive for innovation too. When you have constraints, so there's maybe some of that being lost. I think we were the first, or maybe not the first, certainly the first in my for my recollection. We were the first to really try to focus very hard on getting international partnerships and co-productions done from our games, and because we wanted to sell more games. But what it really did was it increased the baseline of the initial production, because when you make a game, you have to buy all this artwork, you have to buy all these tools, you have to spend all this time creating it before there's ever anything that's been produced. And so that baseline fixed expense is pretty tough. And so if you can get somebody in a foreign language to commit to 1,000 copies or even 500 copies. Back then, we were happy to have somebody commit to 300 copies, because that's 300 copies that allowed us to actually rely on, we could now sell 2,000 or 3,000 copies of something, even if some of them were at a bigger discount internationally, just to get that initial amount of sales up, so we could justify some of those fixed costs. Now it's going straight to the end users. Of course, is much easier. But had we been able to do that, I'm not sure we've been able to pioneer this international network, which we formed, and then later many others replicated. And I think it's still one of the models today for how to do a game, is you have all this network of international partners. But anyway, and I think the relationship with the retail is going to continue to move forward in kind of strange ways. I think there isn't anything. We are a new company, and I think if we were a brand new company, it wasn't me sitting here, I don't necessarily know if you would fault that company in the same way for saying they have this big game, they want to raise the funds to do it, and they want to gauge the market, and so I of course have both the advantage of wisdom, but also expectation from the past that I'm sort of carrying forward. And so I certainly don't think this is any sort of big, betrayal of retail. I do think it's something that has to be lived with. And I think in this particular case, I think it's an important tool to use.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. I think as a retailer, seeing a very successful crowdfunding campaign, regardless of any burnt bridges, would probably do a lot to mend that bridge. If you do see the excitement and the player base there. And one of the things that does make it odd, obviously, is this game is midstream. It doesn't quite feel like it went away and then it's coming back. It kind of feels like the next set's just coming out. And so in the middle of a game, a lot of times, going back to a crowdfunding mechanic, I think games you see start there hit just a little bit different. But what you were talking about makes a lot of sense. So you said the future of KeyForge is going to look a little bit different than what people maybe would have expected just based on what Fantasy Flight was doing with it. even a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to ask, what does the future of KeyForge look like to you? Obviously, you introduced the PvE scenarios. Very excited about that. We'll come back to that as well.
Yeah.
But both in terms of organized play, even the relationship with retail, you said it was going to potentially carry forward in weird ways. I'm curious what the outlook for KeyForge and even the industry in general, from your perspective, looks like in terms of that relationship with retail, and then just the future of the game.
Well, I think I can answer those as two separate questions. I mean, KeyForge, I think for decision makers and publishers, I think there's always a little bit too much sense of conspiracy in that, they have all these plans and they know what they're doing, and they're gaslighting us, or they're doing this and that. No, I mean, for KeyForge, honestly, we're taking one day at a time. We just need to understand where this game is at. We need to know when the crowdfunding platform project hits tomorrow, we know what's going to be the reaction, and we have to be able to change and adapt to whatever we see and whatever outcomes are. In fact, we change and adapt all the time. We're constantly talking to the player base and making up new trains of thought about how to approach a certain problem or not. And of course, we're using that against a backdrop of our foundation in where we've come from, and where we know there needs to be some solid values and some solid theories where this is how we're going to do it. And yes, it can be debated, but we're just going to stick with this, and because we've been there, we've done that. Being able to be flexible and understand where things are going, and this is also related to the retail base with KeyForge. We just don't know where that's going to go. I mean, we are going to be releasing these KeyForge adventures into retail, and that will give us a really good, strong picture about what's the retail base. Is it substantial enough to support KeyForge? This will give us a little bit of since this is releasing relatively quickly here in the next month or so, I think it will give us 6 weeks probably. I think it will give us a good sense for like what's the well water taste like right now from the retail side. And I don't know how that's going to be. I just don't know. Are thousands of retailers going to be picking this up, or a couple of dozen, or what's going to be the story? So we have to be able to react to that. So in terms of KeyForge, I think it's a lot of sort of interesting experiment. Seasoned team, but it's a very highly complicated game that has all sorts of issues and problems. Faced a pandemic, now they're trying to bring it back. What do they know I don't? And it's just like, well, not much more than you do, but we certainly are poking away into different holes and see if there's any bears, lying in there, or if we can safely go in. And so we're going to be reacting quite a bit. In terms of the industry, we've had some discussions about this before, and where does retail go? These are excellent questions. I think I'm happy to see that, certainly from my own experience here, that people are coming back in the retail store and participating in person. I think that the pandemic, not engaging with the community physically could have been an extremely painful and could have injured our industry more than pretty much anything else, because I think it's that physical presence and that community that you build that's just a key ingredient to it. Sure, you can play some games over Zoom, or you can play electronic versions of them, and that ultimately would be then what it becomes, is electronic versions just do remote gaming a heck of a lot better than the physical games, and we are firmly rooted in that physicality of games, even though we are using technology in many different ways. I mean, in many ways, KeyForge is an digital game. It can't actually be created without a massive digital back end. In this case, it just instantiates itself in these, unique objects that are played physically. But I have some thoughts as to the for publishers, retailers are very valuable. But how do they pay for the services that the retailers provide? It used to be through a discount on a product. So for the typical discount would be, I have a product that costs $100. I'm going to sell it to the retailer for $50. Retailer sells it for $50. And so on. And that becomes more and more tricky as all of those, many of these projects are coming out from Kickstarter. There's an avalanche of new board games and all of the various add-ons and stuff that comes out with them. Retailers are, why should they bring them in? There isn't any, the part of the pact between retail and the brand is that there will be some attraction for people coming into the store, right, to actually buy it. So the retailer is working hard to bring people into the store, but the brands don't seem to cooperate. They kind of want their cake and eat it too, and that's challenging on the on the retail side. So I think we have to try to find out how to bridge that gap, and I think it's going to have to be some level of compensation that's going to have to come from different parts of the channel for retailers that create certain positive events for games, whether it's an organized play program or whether it's a big event or whatever. I think retailers needs to be rewarded for the community that they create. I have some different ideas of how to do that, but it's not something that's easy to do, and it's something that will take a few years to actually find its way into the market. But I think retailers are very important. I think they're important as community hubs, as places that celebrate their temples of these games. Although the high priest can go out and just advocate directly to the end user, I think over time it's an ecosystem where everybody needs each other. We just have to find out how to put the value where the value is.
Yeah, and so it sounds like it's kind of funny that we're calling them retailers. As a retailer ourselves, it's always an interesting term to label, because it sounds like as a publisher, the biggest thing you're valuing about a retailer isn't the retail part at all. And is that where the friction's coming from?
Well,
in this relationship?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it used to be that the retailers, that their primary attribute was the transaction, where people would go to the retailer, find the game, you sell the game, and it becomes a conduit for which the games flow. And I think the internet, and the big discounting industry has really completely usurped that. So now I think publishers are looking less. It's like, well, if a customer wants to transact with me, and I say customer, I mean an end user wants to transact with me, get my game. There's a lot of ways to do that. That's probably cheaper for that end user, and even for me, because I can send all my stuff to one warehouse and it can be sent out. So what are the retailers there for? And I shouldn't take away transaction entirely as a value. Of course, it's there, but I think undoubtedly that has decreased in value, and other things that the retailers do have increased in value, which is effectively, they become ambassadors. They become the pastors of the local temples of gaming, right? And they become important trendsetters for whatever game is happening in the general environment. And they also do work. They clean bathrooms, and they set up tables, and they pay rent, and we have gamers that come in and participate in those facilities. And of course we've pushed in-store gaming a lot. We have a huge in-store gaming space too, but that also ultimately somehow have to translate into income for the retailer that's actually providing it. And so how that's going to happen is the big trick. How do you funnel that value in? How do you get your congregation of gamers to actually funnel the part of the value that you're creating to the publisher through the retail store? And I think it's an unanswered question. And I don't think it's an easy question. For the publisher, because I've gone through this a lot on Asmodee's side. How do you deal with such as things like counterfeiting and rampant discounting? Because it's of course much cheaper to sell this, via Amazon or whatever have you, that's selling stuff at a lower price than retailers can really afford to do. So the question is then, are they the boogie whip? It needs to go away because they're just not valid anymore. And I logically don't think that's correct, and I also, my heart doesn't hope that's correct, because I love hobby retail. I love it. I hope it will never go away. It's a personal affinity of mine, and maybe a foolish one, but I really believe in it. But it also has to make sense. It has to make sense for everybody involved, and we have to find ways to do that. So that's a lot of kind of blue sky talking about it. I'm not providing any solutions, but to have solutions, we first have to engage the market, and that's what Ghost Galaxy is doing. And I think we're starting with a good first roll of dice here with KeyForge.
One thing I'm curious to get your take on, it's almost an assumption that's being made, and I think it's a fair assumption to be made, especially given how the industry organically evolves. But is there any part of you that wonders if that should be the publisher's problem at all? Because inherently, it seems like the retailers are providing value to players, mm-hmm. and players currently they're paying for it through the purchase of games, and publishers are paying for the value being created by retailers through a discount on the purchase of those games.
Sure.
Is I don't know what would need to happen for the flip to switch, and if players actually do value those things being created by the retailers,
right?
Does it make more sense for them just to be paying for that value?
Yeah, it does. I think ultimately they will, whether it's through retail pricing or otherwise, elsewise. They gain advantage from the efficiencies, but I think it's too cynical of a view to sort of say we don't need retailers, because I think as part of the ecosystem, if you were to unplug them, completely, I think the kind of the whole body falls apart, and that's my view anyway. I think there is opportunities. I think to see whether players will be interested in actually participating in doing that. I mean, our own store here, we do have a membership program, and the people who pay memberships get a variety of different advantages. We haven't decided to, or at least not yet decided to, create a ticket box office in front where we ticket anyone. Obviously, because it's risky for any one store to say, nope, sorry, you have to pay to play. And then you have 5 other stores in the area that are like, come on in, it's free here. And then you have, but that's what competition does. So I think it's not something that can be solved very easily. And I don't think retailers should collude to do that either. But I think the invisible hand of the market, I think, will slowly find a way to get there. And I do think that retailers should be able to make a profit of events that have fees, come participate in a tournament or whatever. And certainly we do. It's not a lot, but there probably should be a per head fee that's added on top of any event. It also incentivizes the retailer to make events, to make things happen, rather than just have a bunch of open tables and people come in and do their own thing, which is all fine, but then retailers are not really doing all that much other than paying rent. If the retailer are going to go participate and create some exciting things, some happening, something people can sign up for, participate, meet new friends, engage in their hobby, and have somebody else do the hard work for, put all the stuff together, because most of us work every day. We don't think about necessarily our hobbies every day, and having a retailer put together something cool and fun and I want to go to, I think the retailer should be rewarded for that. And I think most people are okay paying, event fees of various kinds. The idea of not having, of moving away from open gaming space, I'm leery for, because I think that was a very big, healthy thing for retail, and it is what created, I think, when the value of transactions started declining, the retailers had to find a different angle of value, and I think in general, open gaming space and has done a lot of that. It's crazy. I think we may have talked about this before, but I remember back in the early days when we were starting, and we had retailers get really mad at us if we said something to the public before they knew it. We would announce something online.
Yeah.
We would announce something online, and we would have, a score angry retailers saying, customers come into me and they talk to me about this thing, and I felt stupid because I didn't know what it was, and then I see that you did this online. How dare you? I should have known about this 2 days before the customer, and so on. And so they were also at one point they were the arbiters of information. They were where information about gaming and publishers, whatever, could be had by the end user. And I don't necessarily, blame them for being mad, because that was one of the values that they were adding, and suddenly they're being circumvented by this internet. But it is a different way that retailers were also injured, other than just transaction. They're no longer you go to the game store owner and this person is it was your Google. That was a person that got all of the communiques from distributors and knew everything that was coming out and everything. But I mean, the gamers just had White Dwarf and Dragon magazine to try to get news from the industry, which was, of course, much slower and several months behind the hot happening call from the distributor rep, talking about that new great D&D module coming out. So, and again, this is a bit rambling. I think, and there is no, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And where there's value, there has to be reciprocal value. And so in an area where you add value, but there's no reciprocal value, then it's a kind of a form of charity. And while that's all wonderful, it will ultimately end up drying out in the vine. And so we will lose it because there isn't any business drive to sort of keep it alive. Of course, you have somebody who just wants to have a bunch of people come over during their lifetime, and they don't mind paying all the money. Then wonderful. But that's kind of a whole different kind of story, almost like a nonprofit, a nonprofit gaming space, which could happen, but it's
sure
that wouldn't feed a lot of children of retailers.
So how do you see, KeyForge fitting into this moment of tabletop, right? And even the KeyForge organized play, because it seems like, you talked about some solutions maybe taking years to become reality, that you're maybe even working on now for these kind of friction points. But how does KeyForge function now, and what does organized play to you look like in an ideal 2023, 2024 kind of moment?
Yeah. Good questions. First I want to sort of just identify, when I say organized play, what do I mean? Because that can be a different topic to different people. I think there are two distinct flavors of organized play, and I usually refer to one of them. So you have this notion of I call them community events in stores, where people get together and they play their favorite game, whether it's a store organizing a weekly D&D get together, or casual Friday Night Magic, or any of those things are, in a sense, organized play. Somebody is organizing it, somebody is putting it together, but there isn't any structure to it. Usually, it's just you get to see your friends, you get to participate in the activity that you like, and that's all good. So I'll call that community organized play, or just community play, or league play. And then there is the other side of organized plays, which is the structured competitive side of organized play, where from the publisher's perspective, we say we want to have this infrastructure that we support and we invest in, that creates a competitive scene that we support, that somehow we will need retailers or tournament organizers of various kinds to set them up, and from that there will be some winners, and from those winners maybe they will rise to different levels, et cetera, and maybe there will be a world championship. So that's a whole different story, and it's a much more rigid one than your community play, because all of a sudden you have people playing to win, and you need they're going to feel that they need some very rigid framework on how do I win exactly, so it isn't ambiguous. Where do I go to participate? What are the aspirations I can have about where to go and how to do it? And that's that's the organized play that I usually refer to, because that's where, from a publisher perspective, we're mostly involved. So for KeyForge, I think both are very relevant, because you have a competitive scene that are out there. It's a strange game to be competitive with because of some of the nature of how the game expresses itself when it's opened up. And then you have a lot of casual fans that just like to do casual things, KeyForge, and they have many, many, many different types of games that they play, whether it's adaptive games where you play the same deck, and then you give your deck to the opponent, and you play again, and whoever wins now gets to play with both decks to kind of even out some of the weirdnesses that come out of KeyForge. And there are many other different kinds of games, different kind of game types. You have the Dead Dog game, where everybody brings a deck that's never won, and all these crazy and fun formats. And I think there's a world where they belong, and I think there's a world where they should be encouraged. But I think they also on the flip side can hurt games, particularly games where there's an aspirational side to it relating to the OP I refer to, which is a competitive OP. So in my view, the most important aspect of a game is that I can find another player. That's the biggest crucial impact of most. If you have solo games, sure, they're an entirely different category. They're wonderful, but when we talk about OP, we don't talk about solo games, at least in my view. There could be some interesting, when I'm saying that, there could be some really weird, interesting ideas that could pop up. Say, wait, but solo play OP, interesting. People get excited about that. But the most games require you to find at least one other player, sometimes more. And so when you go to a neutral place, like a game store or convention or tournament event or whatever, the important part is from the point of view of the game, I have to connect people. They have to connect and play together. And if we're not playing the same game, we have a much higher likelihood of it not connecting. So if I'm coming to an event and I want to play such and such flavor of KeyForge, and somebody else comes to the same event, but they only want to play such and such different flavor of KeyForge, then we have that worst case scenario in some ways where they're not connecting. They're not really playing the same game. And that injures the cohesion of a game and of a player community. Now, that can be going too far. That's not to say there can't be fun things that happen, and you can do variants and et cetera, but ultimately, the more of that you create, the more of a chance there are that you're not having players connect to play the same game. And so that's a sort of a foundational philosophy of mine that I have to sort of bring into this. How do players speak the same language? How do we engage in the same product? As an example, we had a game that we published, Arkham Horror, as a game. It's a board game, completely different from many of the games we're thinking about when we talk about OP. Now, we didn't have an OP program for Arkham Horror, but it did cause some of the same problems, because we had all these expansions for Arkham Horror, these huge expansions that added a lot to the game. And people have very strong opinions about what expansions should be in and not in, and what would they want to do, and da-da-da-da. And so we had all of these circumstances that came together where people weren't really playing the same Arkham Horror game. They was like, I don't want to play with you because you like to play with this, and that's boring, and I don't want to do that. So how do you, it's an enigma how you create this kind of verisimilitude and richness in a game, and also make people come together in the same game. One thing that I did in a game like Eldritch Horror, which is the sister game to Arkham Horror, is that I was proud of the fact that we actually baked in expansions into it. So we actually created a mini game system where each expansion brought some cards in. At the beginning of the game, you would shuffle these cards, and this deck of cards you would shuffle would grow and grow and grow as more expansions you put in. And it kind of, you draw two of those cards, and that would kind of dictate, it would gamify which expansions you'd use for this particular game. So everybody would sort of have a thing, okay, we have all these opportunities. We don't know which ones are going to pop up, but the more stuff I have, the more kind of cool variety we're going to have pop out of that, deck, and so everybody could. And that doesn't prevent anybody from saying, "Screw that damn deck! I want to play with, I want to play with the Mountains of Madness expansion this time." And tough if you don't like to do it, but it does at least create an opportunity for people to have that kind of level built into the game without a whole lot of disruption. So, when it relates to OP, I think a mistake on the OP side for the competitive OP was this support for this huge garden variety of different formats. It was very confusing, and people gravitated now to all these different formats, and so now you have this balkanization of preference in all these formats, which is why if you try to go in and repair this and saying, really sorry guys, we're not going to only have one format, but we're going to have a very, very few, and we're going to interface them in a way that makes sense so everybody's coming together and playing the same thing, you're always going to disappoint some of these balkanized states that are, hard wired into one given format or the next. So how do we deal with that? Well, that's like I said. There's sometimes you can't, and that's a little bit similar to how do we work with retailers and also have a crowdfunding platform. You can't have everything all the time. That's not to say that there cannot be both a thriving community play, league play, casual play environment and a competitive play environment, and so we certainly hope we can make both of those work. It's going to require that both of them are supported in some way, whereas the support on the community side, of course, is going to be less involved. It's going to be more of in the form of an encouragement and providing various maybe items and formats, but by which people could have some sort of a structure to their community event, so there's at least some elements that seem supported from the publisher. And of course, the tournament OP is almost inherently dictated by the publisher, and it usually resides in different layers. You have your store events, your tournament events. You have your regional events. You have your national events, and then you have your world championship event. And the one thing that I'm happy to say is that we are going to be returning to a kind of a world championship event that will be here at our facilities here in Roseville. And I think that allows us, by it being local here, really allows us to do the very, very best, and we can control the environment. And we've invested a lot in our facilities here. So next time you come visit, I know you guys have been there a number of times. Next time you come visit, hopefully you'll appreciate all of the upgrades that we made to lighting and sound. And we have in our biggest hall here, we actually have what is it? It's like something like a 27-foot LCD monitor or something like that. So we have this huge screen that we can broadcast games on or presentations or whatever. So yeah, we'll be trying to attack both those OP areas. Obviously, with the more success that we get in the GameFound campaign, the more confidence we'll have and to actually put behind that.
Sure. And so in an ideal world, campaign starts now. So we're in, what month is this even? September 2022. Let's just say that goes very successfully. When do you expect the win set to be out? And then what does the ramp up into organized play and releases look like at that point, assuming, a reasonable amount of success?
So one of the really cool things about Winds of Exchange, and this also relates a little bit to the crowdfunding campaign, is that we are focusing on something that we can actually create here. So that's why we have stuff like playmats and the actual cards and other materials. We could have gone out and tried to make all sorts of sexy tchotchkes or whatever, in China or elsewhere, but that would have created a much more uncertainty and delays related to the actual delivery of the Winds of Exchange set. So we decided, maybe to some people's disappointment, that there isn't all sorts of, blingy jazz stuff for the game, but the crowdfunding campaign will not have a lot of these what you sort of consider to be gold-plated dice, or pre-printed miniatures or anything like that many crowdfunding campaigns get. Instead, it will be a little more meat and potatoes, and the reason that is because we can, the more we can control that, the more we can actually produce it ourselves. I think next week we'll put a little video together where we actually take a tour over at the factory here, which is like right across the parking lot where I'm sitting, and just give people a little bit of an introduction to sort of the machines and the people that are going to be hopefully creating lots and lots of KeyForge decks.
So expectation would be mid next year.
No, much sooner than that. If we have a successful campaign, we're doing a relatively short campaign. It's not a long one. It's I think it will end after 2 weeks. If that's successful, and again, success is subjective in this case. Yes, we meet our threshold. We'll get this game out, but we will be able to get on that relatively quickly. We have some play testing and some work yet to do on the game because when we took the game over, we just didn't want to put it out as it was. There was a few particular points in the game, the way they worked. Some of them relating to token creatures that we didn't agree with, and so we are revisiting that area, and we'll be doing some testing and some community engagement related to those. Not a lot because it's a fairly small change, but we are going to be doing some Q&A. But that will probably happen alongside this campaign. So I mean, I'm hopeful that people will be able to get a hands on Winds of Exchange decks, at the very, very end of the year, maybe in the first month or two in 2023, somewhere in that range. And that's, we think the game needs to get stuff. And players need, product players needs more cool decks. We need to get tournaments back up and running. So that's sort of my expectation of this. We are moving forward also with the kind of the general organized play infrastructure and some of the decisions related to the game formats that will be played. And I think we'll be ready to talk about them probably 2 or 3 weeks from now, maybe during the campaign, maybe just right after. We'll have that material put together. And so we're hoping to kickstart some to initiate some good OP programs and some support for OP programs toward the end of the year. So we like to get OP and some structural things going by November.
By this November.
This November, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty soon. So I'm curious before we get off the topic, people listening that either are very excited about the campaign or maybe hesitant, whether it's stores or players. Why you obviously believe in this game enough to take a risk. You bought it. You're putting all this effort in to bring it back. But why should they invest in it, right? Why should they take this chance? And if they're willing to take the chance, what's the best thing they can do in the next 2 weeks to support your campaign? Well,
we're not expecting anybody to take a chance on it that don't believe that KeyForge could be a fun game to play. I mean, if you are a fan of KeyForge and you want more KeyForge, then we urge you to support it because that definitely will be correlative. If you're on the fence or don't know about KeyForge or anything, I think we're down to the brass tacks of any new game coming out, saying why should I play that? It's a great game. It's a fun game. It's a controversial game in many ways because of the particular format and the way it's put together, and it's hard to talk about. I mean, I saw you guys had some videos about this and the Soulforge game the other day. It's kind of a wild and wacky new type of thing that nobody can quite place. Where is it at? Even after 2 years, I think there's still people who are not quite sure one way or the other. I mean, the format itself has some issues that we're going to try to resolve. There's some player agency missing. In terms of I bring a deck and that and that's it. Does how can I feel like I make more decisions related to the play rather than just which single deck am I bringing? And there's an issue of there's an inherent issue of I bought a deck and it got a low score on the SaaS platform and now I threw it away. How do you solve those problems? Those are some of the fundamental problems that we saw, going in saying what are the great things about KeyForge? What are some of the downsides of KeyForge? And we're definitely going to try to, we're not discontinuing any old decks. All the decks are be viable to play. We're continuing in the style and in the spirit of what FFG left off. But we are going to be trying to solve some of those more foundational problems of KeyForge, which is like, what do I do with a deck that's less good than the other deck that I got, and the only choice I had in the matter was me buying it or not. And what do I do with all the decks I have at home that I'm no longer using? I feel like every deck that I buy does not necessarily add to the richness of what I have. It just more likely relegates something else out of, if it's a better deck, then which other deck gets nuked. So I think there are some ways to do that in a very kind of creative way, and that we're going to be trying to push. And I know that's sort of mysterious, but I don't really want to use this particular interview to sort of talk about that. I think that can be a follow-up interview once we talked about some of that. But we are going to be announcing our solution for that, for how to sustain what people love, but also trying to add some whole new concepts that I think on an OP side that will hopefully help alleviate some of these weaknesses. So if you're somebody who's been on the fence about KeyForge because of some of those same concerns, you definitely have a friend in us. Is that we acknowledge them. We think there are solutions. Every game that you play is going to have something that doesn't meet somebody's expectations. So we can't meet everybody, make everybody happy. So if you don't, if you're just dead set against KeyForge, then don't participate. Give your support to some other great game that you love. We hope that there's enough. Our expectations is not that KeyForge is going to rear back to where it was. I don't know if any game can really be expected to do that. Very, very few games, 1 in 10,000 actually get to the heights where KeyForge was at the time. It's too bad that it couldn't sustain that or even grow from there. But we're not really aiming for that. So we're not going to come out and, there's going to be, TV ads and all that stuff. That's not really our motivation of this. Our motivation is to have a really strong game for a strong core community of players, supported hopefully by a strong OP and a large cadre of shops that can make a good business out of deciding to carry KeyForge and supporting it in their store. But the good news then, of course, is that even if it's only 1/10 of what it was, it still makes a lot of sense to have that. And I still think a community that's 1/10 of what it was will still be a strong community. And I think to grow it, I think you just have to do a good job over time. I think our expectation of going out there and revitalizing, the magic, I think it's just not realistic. What is realistic is that there are tens of thousands of players who love the game and want to be engaged with it again. And we have to try to do that. And then to get new players, I think new players just want to see quality gameplay and quality support. And so as a new company, we only thing we can say at this point is just like, well, just wait and see, right? Wait and see what we can do. And some of it is going to have to be proven. Some of it's going to have to be, some people will wait and see what we do, and that's okay. As long as there's enough people in advance that says, please do it, and we'll support it. Because otherwise, of course, we wouldn't get to the point where we would show anything.
Sure. So I know, again, the campaign starts tomorrow. You're busy. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And as a player who loves KeyForge and was very sad about the news of that game going away, very, very appreciative of the efforts you and your team are putting in and the risk that you're taking. I think it can be easy to see the initial launch be super successful, this big game. People have questions about a crowdfunding platform and all that, but I know this is a significant risk that's being taken out of passion for this game, this format, this community. So appreciate you for taking that chance and wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you. I hope it'll be worthwhile. So
yeah, I'm pretty confident, but I hope so too. And really appreciate you coming on. We will do a follow-up. Of course, I didn't get to my million questions. There's still plenty left to ask, but I'll let the campaign speak for itself. We're going to be streaming KeyForge next week. So we'll be seeing how it at least initially goes and talking about that on stream. If you're listening to this and want to see the game played, definitely check out that live stream. We'll be discussing everything that you've announced since then and then checking out the game, playing it. We played it a month back. Still super fun. Love that game. Absolutely love it. So excited for that. Any parting thoughts from you before we get out of here?
No, I want to just reach my hand out to Team Covenant for doing such awesome work for so damn long. I've been in it for a long time, but I'm starting to not remember a time when you guys weren't there also. So I think I think the energy and the passion and the longevity and the sustainability you guys have put into your show and your efforts, I've greatly appreciated by everybody. So whatever side of the table you guys on, you guys do a great job. Thanks. Keep it up.
Well, hey, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been a privilege. It's been, I don't know, 10, 15 years at this point. So many of the projects that you or your companies have been doing have brought so much joy to us and a huge part of our community. So happy to see you back in the tabletop gaming scene, and excited to see what that means, and can't wait to visit the Game Center and see everything you've got going on. Again, wish you nothing but the best. And if you're listening to this, definitely check out the GameFound campaign for KeyForge. This is a lovely game. It's one of the best tabletop gaming communities I've had the privilege of being a part of, and it's like I said, it's rare to see a game come back, let alone see an attempt to be made. So it's a really, really cool moment in tabletop, and I cannot wait to see what the future has in store for KeyForge. Thanks again, Christian.
Thank you very much, guys. See you soon.